totally aware that Instagram's acting super wonky today, but we'll try this anyway. I posted earlier about a study that's coming out. Rachel Warman, Ryan Stafford, David Cowley, Caroline Baldini, Paul Hodges, super fan. Evidence for increased tone or overactivity of pelvic floor muscles in pelvic health conditions, a systematic review. And this is in the American Journal, I think, of Obstetrics and Gynecology. Yep. And it's not in like its beautiful like journal format. I'm pulling it from the journal pre-proof that's on the website. But anyway, really excited when I first saw this. I'm like, yay, we're talking about overactivity, and we have a musculoskeletal condition that's being addressed in an OB/GYN journal. So all good news, right? So this is where I want you to all temper your expectations, and this is where understanding research is really important, because in the title, it literally says a systematic review, okay? And what a systematic review is basically they're going to pull everything that's out there that's remotely relevant to this and then whittle it down and then tell you what they found, okay? And so the conclusion that I posted, on one hand, like it's a little underwhelming, and I'll just read it here so you guys have it. So the objective was pelvic floor muscle tone, which includes active and passive components, is argued to be increased in many pelvic health conditions. I would agree, including those involving pain. I would also add stress urinary incontinence and pelvic organ prolapse. Study systematically reviewed evidence for increased pelvic floor muscle tone in pelvic health conditions. And they searched databases up to May 31st, 2021. And so the interesting conclusion here that you might be like, what? Despite the large literature, few studies provide convincing evidence for increased tone overactivity of pelvic floor muscles in pelvic health conditions. Interpretation is hampered by design and measurement issues. Terminology was often inaccurate, and few studies investigate male, transgender, and pediatric groups. So to this, I said, great. And this is why. We have to look back so we can look forward. And part of the big issue, and I think at least, just a cursory review of this article is like, when you go back and try and understand overactivity or high tone, the terminology is not the same. So, and this is honestly the case in a lot of pelvic floor literature. It's really hard to compare because it's not apples to apples. They're using different words and you can't tell if they kind of mean the same thing or they don't. Obviously it was an inclusion. It wasn't including a lot of different male, transgender, peds, not looking at any of that. And I think also if you look backwards, I mean, just in my 23-year career, overactivity when I first started, it really wasn't a thing. We talked about tight muscles and that was only pain. And then when we started to understand activity, overactivity, I think that we have a lot of theories, and I think clinically I can give you some of my kind of thoughts about why there's overactivity or high tone, but we don't have any evidence in black and white to point to that. And I think the point of a systematic review like this is like, hey, when we look back, this isn't helpful, and we have to be really clear in identifying terminology so we can compare apples to apples, and how we design studies so that you're really looking at what you think you're looking at. And again, I think this is also why I'm a clinician and not a researcher. There's so many freaking variables. One of the things that I'm looking for with a client is there's always more than one reason to point to overactivity. Why does the brain think that the muscle should be like this? And usually there's more than one reason. And again, if we're going to change that, we have to understand what the primary ones are, because if we're going to change the brain's mind, we need to give it a really good reason to do that. We need to give it options and kind of hit some of the main points. So some people might be like, oh, this isn't helpful. There is no overactivity. No, that's not it at all. A systematic review is, hey, what do we got up to this point? This will help us formulate our questions going forward. And I think that will help clarify some of the translating some of the clinical questions that we have to the research. And And if you're a client, if you're a patient, you're a mom, you're trying to understand, okay, well, somebody's told me I have overactivity. Do I have it? Do I not have it? What does that mean? Why is it not in the literature? We are in a different place in clinic than we are in the research. And I think that's why it's so hard. You want to find somebody who is evidence informed, but it's really hard to say 100% of the stuff that I do, I can tie back exactly to a line in a paper or, something along those lines. It's just, we're far too new at this. There's, again, like how I treat now compared to a year ago, 3 years ago, 7 years ago. That's why I love seeing clients I haven't seen in a couple of years, because I have a ton of new ideas and where we might have gotten stuck before. And now I'm finding a new way forward. Like literally overactivity, I wasn't considering it. Nobody was for stress incontinence or pelvic organ prolapse, not until maybe the last 4 or 5 years. So this is good. Because we have to have a foundation to build those research questions on. Does it help me clinically? I'm happy they did it, because that means, we're going in the right direction. But does overactivity or high tone exist? Yeah, 100%. Does it exist for the reasons why we think it might in clinic? I don't know. But what I can tell you is clinically, we've got some good clinical cases to show that it does. Now we've got to try and pull them under a bigger umbrella in the research, so that I can turn to you in a couple of years and say, hey, I have evidence-based information to point to, your particular scenario. This is what they've seen in papers and that kind of stuff. So it's not exciting in the respect of, oh my gosh, we've got this whole new information. But the fact that they're even asking the question, we've got this published, like, hey, y'all got to do better moving forward. That's actually really good. And again, totally 100% why I am not a researcher, because I sadly don't have the patience for that. I want to play with things. I want to play with the variables and all that good stuff. So tell me what you think. Are you excited? Are you like, tell me what you think. And if you are a mom or just any woman that has overactivity, tell me what you've been told as to the why. I would be really curious, kind of the explanations you've been given. And then also providers, what explanations do you give, knowing that we don't necessarily have great papers pointing to this stuff? How do you explain to people what overactivity is and why they have it? Would love to hear.